The sun was setting over the small Igbo village, casting a golden glow over the thatched roofs and the bustling town square. The air was alive with the sounds of laughter and music as the villagers prepared for the Christmas celebrations. Children were running around, playing with each other and laughing, while the women were busy cooking and preparing for the festivities. The men were gathered under the shade of a big tree, drinking and chatting. In the midst of all the excitement and joy, one person stood out, Neoma, the elder sister of the family. She was a tall, gaunt woman in her late 30s, with a scowl etched on her face. She had always been the responsible one, taking care of her younger siblings and helping her parents with the family farm. But now, as she watched her younger sister, Ada, return to the village with her husband and 3 kids, Neoma couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. Ada was living the life Neoma had always dreamed of, married to a successful man, with beautiful children and a comfortable life in the US. Neoma, on the other hand, was still unmarried, living in the village and struggling to make ends meet. She felt like a failure, and the sight of her successful younger sister only rubbed salt in the wound. As the villagers welcomed Ada and her family with open arms, Neoma couldn't bring herself to join in. She stood aside, her eyes narrowed and her heart seething with envy. Ada, oblivious to her sister's feelings, was busy hugging and greeting the villagers. She was a warm and bubbly person, always with a smile on her face. Her husband, Obinna, was a tall, handsome man with a kind face. He was a successful businessman, and he had brought his family back to the village to spend the Christmas holidays. As the villagers gathered around Ada and her family, Neoma slipped away, unnoticed. She walked back to her family's compound, her heart heavy with jealousy and resentment. Why did Ada have to come back now, of all times? Why did she have to rub her success in Neoma's face? Neoma felt like she was going to explode. She had always been the responsible one, the one who had taken care of everyone else. But now, it seemed like no one cared about her. No one cared about her feelings or her well-being. As she walked into her family's compound, Neoma saw her parents and younger siblings gathered around the fire, laughing and chatting. They were all so happy, so carefree. But Neoma couldn't join in. She couldn't pretend to be happy when she was seething with jealousy and resentment. She walked over to her parents and younger siblings, a fake smile plastered on her face. "Welcome back, Ada," she said, trying to sound sincere. Her parents and younger siblings looked at her in surprise. They had never seen Neoma like this before. She was always the strong one, the one who held everything together. But now, it seemed like Neoma was cracking under the pressure. As the night wore on, Neoma's feelings of jealousy and resentment only grew stronger. She couldn't bear the thought of Ada and her family being happy, while she was stuck in this miserable village, struggling to make ends meet. She felt like she was going to explode. She felt like she was going to do something terrible. And then, just as she was about to lose control, Neoma saw a group of notorious criminals gathered under the shade of a big tree, drinking and chatting. They were a ruthless bunch, known for their brutal tactics and complete disregard for human life. Neoma knew that she shouldn't be talking to them, but something about their confidence and swagger drew her in. As she approached them, Neoma felt a sense of calm wash over her. She knew that she was taking a risk, but she didn't care. She was desperate, and she would do anything to get what she wanted. "Welcome, Neoma," one of the criminals said, with a sly smile. "What brings you here tonight?" Neoma took a deep breath, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. "I have a job for you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The criminals looked at each other, their eyes gleaming with interest. "What kind of job?" one of them asked. Neoma hesitated for a moment, her heart racing with excitement and fear. "I want you to kidnap my sister's husband," she said, her voice firm and resolute. The criminals looked at each other, their faces expressionless. "We can do that," one of them said finally. "But it's going to cost you." Neoma nodded, her heart pounding with excitement and fear. Neoma's heart was racing as she walked away from the criminals. She had never done anything like this before, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the consequences. But as she thought about Ada and her perfect life, Neoma's anger and resentment boiled over. She was tired of being the poor, unmarried sister. She was tired of being looked down on. The criminals had promised to take care of everything. They would kidnap Ada's husband, Obinna, and demand a ransom in exchange for his safe return. Neoma had agreed to pay them a hefty sum of money, but she knew it would be worth it. She would finally have the upper hand. As she walked back to her family's compound, Neoma couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. She knew that what she was doing was wrong, but she didn't care. She was finally taking control of her life. The next few days passed quickly. Neoma went about her daily routine, pretending as if nothing was out of the ordinary. But at night, she would sneak out of the compound and meet with the criminals. They would discuss the plan, and Neoma would hand over the money. It was all coming together perfectly. And then, on the night of the kidnapping, Neoma's heart was racing with excitement. She watched from a distance as the criminals snatched Obinna from his home. It was done. Neoma slipped back into the shadows, a smile spreading across her face. She had done it. She had finally taken revenge on her perfect sister. But as she walked back to her family's compound, Neoma couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Something didn't feel right. And then, just as she was about to enter the compound, Neoma saw Ada's face. Her sister was frantic with worry, her eyes red from crying. "Obinna is gone," Ada sobbed. "I don't know what happened to him." Neoma's smile faltered for a moment. She hadn't expected Ada to be so distraught. But then, she composed herself. She had to keep up the act. "I'm so sorry, Ada," Neoma said, trying to sound sincere. "We'll find him. Don't worry." Ada looked at her, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Neoma," she said. "I don't know what I would do without you." Neoma's heart twisted with guilt. She knew that she was the one responsible for Obinna's disappearance. But she pushed the feeling aside. She had to keep up the act. And so, Neoma pretended to help Ada search for Obinna. She pretended to be concerned, to be worried. But all the while, she was secretly smiling to herself. She had done it. She had finally taken revenge on her perfect sister. I see you're enjoying the story. Please subscribe if you want to continue seeing interesting stories like this. Have you subscribed? Okay, now back to the story. The days passed, and the search for Obinna continued. Ada was frantic with worry, and the villagers were all pitching in to help. Neoma was pretending to help with the search, but she was actually just going through the motions. She knew that Obinna was being held by the criminals, and she knew that they would only release him when the ransom was paid. As the search party combed through the village and the surrounding countryside, Neoma couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt. She had never meant for things to go this far. But she pushed the feeling aside. She had to keep up the act. The villagers were all talking about the kidnapping, and they were all speculating about who could have done such a thing. Neoma listened to their conversations, pretending to be interested. But she knew the truth. She knew that she was the one responsible for Obinna's disappearance. As the sun began to set, the search party returned to the village, exhausted and defeated. Ada was crying, and Neoma's parents were trying to comfort her. Neoma stood aside, watching the scene unfold. She felt a pound of guilt, but she pushed it aside. She knew that she had to keep up the act. Just then, one of the villagers approached Neoma. It was an old man, with a kind face and a twinkle in his eye. "Neoma, my dear," he said. I think I might know something about the kidnapping. Neoma's heart skipped a beat. What did the old man know? What is it? She asked, trying to sound nonchalant. The old man looked around nervously, then leaned in close. I saw someone lurking around the village last night, he said. Someone who looked suspicious. Neoma's heart was racing. Who had the old man seen? Who was it? She asked, trying to sound calm. The old man hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. It was one of the criminals from the city, he said. I think they might be involved in the kidnapping. Neoma's eyes widened. The old man had seen one of the criminals. She knew that she had to do something. She had to throw the old man off the scent. I think you must be mistaken, she said, trying to sound convincing. The criminals from the city wouldn't dare come here. The old man looked uncertain, and Neoma knew that she had succeeded in throwing him off the scent. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was in trouble. The old man had seen one of the criminals, and it was only a matter of time before he put two and two together. Neoma knew that she had to do something. She had to make sure that the old man didn't talk. And so, she began to formulate a plan. A plan to silence the old man once and for all. The days passed, and the villagers were getting more and more desperate. Ada was beside herself with worry, and the villagers were all pitching in to help find Obinna. Neoma was pretending to help with the search, but she was actually just waiting for the ransom demand to be made. She knew that the criminals would contact Ada soon, demanding money in exchange for Obinna's safe return. And then, one day, the demand came. Ada received a phone call from an unknown number, and the voice on the other end demanded a hefty sum of money in exchange for Obinna's safe return. Ada was frantic, and the villagers were all trying to come up with the money. But Neoma just smiled to herself, knowing that she had planned the whole thing. As the villagers scrambled to come up with the ransom money, Neoma slipped away, unnoticed. She made her way to the agreed meeting point, where she handed over the money to the criminals. It was all going according to plan. Neoma had gotten away with the perfect crime. But as she walked back to the village, Neoma couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Something didn't feel right. And then, just as she was about to enter the village, Neoma saw Ada's face. Her sister was crying, and her eyes were red from lack of sleep. Neoma, I'm so scared, Ada said, running to her sister. I don't know what to do. Neoma's heart twisted with guilt. She knew that she was the one responsible for Ada's pain. But she pushed the feeling aside. She had to keep up the act. Don't worry, Ada, Neoma said, trying to sound sincere. We'll get Obinna back. I promise. Ada looked at her, her eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Neoma, she said. I don't know what I would do without you. Neoma's heart twisted with guilt again. She knew that she was lying to her sister. But she pushed the feeling aside. She had to keep up the act. And so, Neoma continued to pretend to help Ada, all the while knowing that she was the one responsible for Obinna's disappearance. But as the days passed, Neoma couldn't shake off the feeling that she was in trouble. The villagers were getting suspicious, and Ada was starting to wonder if something was off. Neoma knew that she had to do something. She had to throw them off the scent. And so, she began to formulate a plan. A plan to distract the villagers and throw them off her trail. But as she was planning, Neoma didn't realize that someone was watching her. Someone who knew her secrets. And that someone was about to blow her cover. As the days passed, Neoma's guilt began to eat away at her. She knew that she had done something terrible, and she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was going to get caught. Ada was getting more and more desperate, and the villagers were starting to suspect that something was off. They would whisper to each other when Neoma walked by, and she could tell that they were talking about her. One day, As Neoma was walking through the village, she saw one of the villagers staring at her. It was an old woman, with a kind face and a twinkle in her eye. "Neoma, my dear," the old woman said, as Neoma approached her. "I've been watching you. I know what you've been up to." Neoma's heart skipped a beat. What did the old woman know? "I don't know what you're talking about," Neoma said, trying to sound innocent. The old woman smiled. "Don't play dumb with me, Neoma," she said. "I know that you're involved in Obinna's disappearance. And I'm going to tell Ada." Neoma's eyes widened. She knew that she had to do something. She had to stop the old woman from telling Ada. "Please, don't tell Ada," Neoma said, grabbing the old woman's arm. "I'll do anything. Just please don't tell her." The old woman looked at Neoma, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and pity. "You're a wicked girl, Neoma," she said. "But I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. Tell Ada the truth, and I'll keep quiet." Neoma hesitated. She knew that she had to tell Ada the truth. But she was scared. She was scared of what Ada would do when she found out. As she stood there, frozen with fear, the old woman turned and walked away. Neoma knew that she had to make a decision. She had to tell Ada the truth, or risk being exposed. But as she turned to go back to her family's compound, Neoma saw something that made her blood run cold. Ada was standing outside the compound, a look of determination on her face. "Neoma, I need to talk to you," Ada said, her voice firm. "I know that you're involved in Obinna's disappearance. And I'm going to find out what you've done with him." Neoma's heart sank. She knew that she was caught. She knew that she had to tell Ada the truth. But as she looked into Ada's eyes, Neoma saw something that gave her pause. She saw a glimmer of suspicion, a glimmer of doubt. And in that moment, Neoma knew that she had a chance to save herself. She had a chance to convince Ada that she was innocent. But as she opened her mouth to speak, Neoma knew that she was taking a risk. She was taking a risk that Ada would see right through her. And if Ada didn't believe her, Neoma knew that she would be in grave danger. She would be in danger of being exposed, of being punished for her crimes. But Neoma was desperate. She was desperate to save herself, to convince Ada that she was innocent. And so, she took a deep breath and began to speak. She began to spin a web of lies, a web of deceit. But as she spoke, Neoma knew that she was playing with fire. She was playing with Ada's trust, with Ada's love. And if Ada found out the truth, Neoma knew that she would lose everything. She would lose Ada's trust, Ada's love. But Neoma was willing to take that risk. She was willing to risk everything to save herself. And so, she continued to speak, continued to spin her web of lies. But as she spoke, Neoma knew that she was living on borrowed time. She knew that eventually, Ada would find out the truth. And when Ada did, Neoma knew that she would lose all her trust. Ada's eyes narrowed as she listened to Neoma's explanation. She had always thought of Neoma as her responsible and caring older sister, but now she wasn't so sure. "I don't believe you," Ada said, her voice firm. "I know that you're involved in Obinna's disappearance. And I'm going to find out what you've done with him." Neoma's face fell, and she took a step back. "Ada, please," she said. "You have to believe me. I didn't do anything." But Ada just shook her head. "I'm going to investigate this myself," she said. "And I'm going to find out what really happened to Obinna." Neoma's eyes widened in alarm as Ada turned and walked away. She knew that she had to do something to stop Ada from investigating. But what? As Neoma stood there, trying to think of a plan, she saw a figure watching her from across the compound. It was one of the villagers, a quiet and reserved man named Okoro. Okoro had always been a bit of a mystery to Neoma. He kept to himself, and nobody really knew much about him. But as Neoma looked into his eyes, she saw something there that gave her a spark of hope. She saw a glimmer of understanding, a glimmer of sympathy. And in that moment, Neoma knew that she had found an ally. She knew that Okoro would help her to stop Ada from investigating. "Okoro," Neoma said, walking over to him. "I need your help." Okoro looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What do you need help with?" he asked. Neoma hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Ada is investigating Obina's disappearance," she said. "And I need you to help me stop her." Okoro's expression didn't change, but Neoma saw a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Why do you want to stop her?" he asked. Neoma hesitated again before speaking. "Because I know what really happened to Obina," she said. "And I don't want Ada to find out." Okoro's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at Neoma with a newfound intensity. "I see," he said. "And what do you propose I do to help you?" Neoma smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that she had found an ally in Okoro. "I'll tell you everything," she said. "And then we can come up with a plan to stop Ada." Okoro nodded, and Neoma began to explain everything. She told him about the kidnapping, about the ransom demand, and about her plan to keep Ada from investigating. As she spoke, Neoma felt a sense of weight lifting off her shoulders. She knew that she had found someone who could help her, someone who could keep her secret safe. But as she looked into Okoro's eyes, Neoma saw something there that gave her pause. She saw a glimmer of curiosity, a glimmer of suspicion. And in that moment, Neoma wondered if she had made a mistake. She wondered if she had just entrusted her secret to the wrong person. Okoro listened intently as Neoma explained her plan. He nodded along, his expression unreadable. When Neoma finished speaking, Okoro nodded thoughtfully. "I see," he said. "And what do you want me to do?" Neoma hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I want you to help me distract Ada," she said. "I want you to make sure she doesn't investigate any further." Okoro raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose I do that?" he asked. Neoma smiled. "Leave that to me," she said. "I have a plan." Okoro nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'm intrigued," he said. "Tell me more." Neoma leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking," she said. "Ada is always talking about how much she misses Obina. So, I was thinking, what if we give her something to distract her?" Okoro's eyes narrowed slightly. "What did you have in mind?" he asked. Neoma smiled. "I was thinking we could give her a false lead," she said. "Something to make her think that Obina is still alive." Okoro's expression changed, and for a moment, Neoma saw a glimmer of surprise. "That's clever," he said. "But it's also risky. What if Ada finds out?" Neoma shrugged. "That's a risk I'm willing to take," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep Ada from investigating." Okoro nodded thoughtfully. "I see," he said. "And what do you want me to do?" Neoma smiled. "I want you to help me spread the false lead," she said. "I want you to make sure that Ada hears the rumor." Okoro nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "I'll take care of it," he said. As Okoro walked away, Neoma felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that she had found an ally in Okoro, and she was confident that together, they could keep Ada from investigating. But as she watched Okoro disappear into the crowd, Neoma couldn't shake off the feeling that she was in over her head. She knew that she was playing with fire, and she wasn't sure if she would get burned. Little did Neoma know, Okoro had an ulterior motive for helping her. And it wasn't what Neoma expected. Okoro walked through the village, spreading the false lead that Neoma had given him. He whispered it in the ears of the villagers, making sure that everyone heard the rumor. "Obinna is alive," he whispered. "I saw him myself, hiding in the forest." The villagers gasped and whispered to each other, their eyes wide with excitement. They had been searching for Obinna for days, and now it seemed like they finally had a lead. Ada heard the rumor and rushed to Neoma's side. "Did you hear?" she asked, her eyes shining with hope. "Obinna is alive." Neoma smiled and nodded, trying to look relieved. "Yes, I heard," she said. "Let's go look for him." Together, the sisters set out into the forest, searching for Obinna. But Neoma knew that they wouldn't find him. She knew that the rumor was false, and that Obinna was still being held captive by the kidnappers. As they searched, Neoma couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. She knew that she was deceiving her sister, and that Ada would be devastated when she found out the truth. But Neoma pushed the feeling aside. She knew that she had to keep up the act, no matter how hard it was. As the sun began to set, Neoma and Ada returned to the village, exhausted and defeated. They had searched everywhere, but there was no sign of Obinna. Ada looked at Neoma, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand," she said. "I thought we would find him." Neoma smiled and hugged her sister. "We'll keep looking," she said. "I promise." But as she hugged Ada, Neoma couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She knew that she was living on borrowed time, and that eventually, Ada would find out the truth. And when she did, Neoma knew that she would be in grave danger. Ada was devastated. She had been searching for Obinna for days, and now it seemed like all hope was lost. She wandered around the village, feeling lost and alone. Neoma watched her sister with a mixture of guilt and anxiety. She knew that she had to keep up the act, but it was getting harder and harder. Just then, Okoro approached Neoma. "I think it's time we told Ada the truth," he said quietly. Neoma's eyes widened in alarm. "No," she whispered. "We can't tell her yet." Okoro raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" he asked. Neoma hesitated. She didn't know how to explain her reasons to Okoro. But before she could say anything, Ada approached them. "Neoma, I need to talk to you," she said, her eyes filled with determination. Neoma's heart skipped a beat. What did Ada want to talk to her about? "Okay, Ada," Neoma said, trying to sound calm. "What is it?" Ada took a deep breath. "I know that you're hiding something from me," she said. "I know that you know more about Obinna's disappearance than you're letting on." Neoma's eyes widened in alarm. How did Ada know? But before she could say anything, Okoro intervened. "Ada, I think it's time we told you the truth," he said quietly. Neoma's heart sank. What was Okoro doing? But before she could stop him, Okoro began to explain. "Neoma was involved in Obinna's disappearance," he said. "She hired the kidnappers to take him." Ada's eyes widened in shock. "Neoma, is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling. Neoma nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. It was finally out in the open. But as she looked at Ada's face, Neoma knew that she had made a terrible mistake. Ada's eyes were filled with anger and betrayal. And in that moment, Neoma knew that she had lost her sister's trust forever. Ada's eyes were filled with tears as she looked at Neoma. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Neoma, how could you?" Ada asked, her voice shaking with anger and sadness. "How could you do this to me, to Obinna, to our family?" Neoma looked down, unable to meet Ada's eyes. She knew that she had made a terrible mistake, and now she had to face the consequences. "I'm sorry, Ada," Neoma said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was jealous and angry, and I let my emotions consume me. I never meant to hurt you or Obinna." Ada shook her head. You never meant to hurt us, she repeated. How could you not mean to hurt us? You hired kidnappers to take Obinna. What did you think would happen? Neoma sighed. She knew that she had made a mistake, and now she had to pay the price. I don't know, Ada, Neoma said. I wasn't thinking. I was blinded by my own jealousy and anger. Ada looked at Neoma with disgust. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Neoma, she said. You have broken my trust, and I don't know if it can ever be repaired. Neoma nodded. She knew that she didn't deserve Ada's forgiveness. I understand, Ada, Neoma said. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I hope that one day, you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Ada turned and walked away, leaving Neoma alone. Neoma knew that she had lost her sister's trust, and she didn't know if she would ever be able to regain it. As she stood there, feeling sorry for herself, Neoma heard a voice behind her. Neoma. She turned to see Okoro standing behind her. Yes? Neoma asked. Okoro looked at her with a serious expression. You need to face the consequences of your actions, he said. You need to tell the police what you did. Neoma nodded. She knew that she had to face the consequences of her actions. I'll do it, Neoma said. I'll tell the police everything. Okoro nodded. I'll go with you, he said. Together, Neoma and Okoro went to the police station and told them everything. Neoma confessed to hiring the kidnappers and orchestrating Obinna's disappearance. The police arrested Neoma and charged her with kidnapping and conspiracy. As Neoma sat in her cell, waiting for her trial, she couldn't help but think about what she had done. She had let her jealousy and anger consume her, and now she was paying the price. She thought about Ada and Obinna, and how she had hurt them. She thought about her parents, and how they would be affected by her actions. Neoma knew that she had made a terrible mistake, and now she had to face the consequences. But as she sat in her cell, Neoma also knew that she had learned a valuable lesson. She had learned that jealousy and anger can consume you, and that the consequences of your actions can be devastating. And as she waited for her trial, Neoma vowed to change her ways. She vowed to let go of her jealousy and anger, and to become a better person. It was a hard lesson to learn, but Neoma knew that it was one she would never forget. Did Neoma do the right thing? Why would she even kidnap her sister's husband? Have you experienced or seen this kind of jealousy before? Dear friends, please be careful with the kind of people you mingle with this Christmas. You never know who is who. What do you think Neoma should have done? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you want to continue seeing interesting stories like this. To watch more videos like this one, click the right side of your screen to watch any of these two interesting videos. See you in the next video.